Sandstorms, dust storms, al-khamsin, khamasin, Simoom, hibub, bows, or whatever you want to call them. We Arabs have to deal with them every year once spring is upon us. They're a daunting welcome and introduction to the imminent hot summers that are about to grace us with their presence. If you're not Arab, you've seen them many times on these silver screens, mythologized in works of fiction in desert lands that seem remote, harsh, and so far away.
In a few minutes, there'll be no stars. The air is filling with sand.
But the truth of the matter is that these environmental events don't happen in a remote part of the Arab world, not in an isolated desert, nor in an uninhabited, distant region. No, this happens in the midst of cosmopolitan cities. There is no running away once these storms announce their dominant presence as they approach from the distance, or especially when they surprise you without a moment's notice. And in either case, there's no escaping the noticeable impact they have on Arab psyche, mental well-being, and behavior. Each culture deals with its vernacular environmental phenomena in a very specific way. The storm systems I mentioned don't exist solely in the Arab region, but also exist in parts of Africa, Asia, and North America. But how each society understands, relates, and deals with such phenomena always has to do with their own specific heritage and tradition, and how the Arab mood and state of being evolves around the arrival of such an event, and whether a positive or negative reaction is necessary. What's obvious is how such storms can quickly shift a city's day-to-day landscape to one of an orange desolation, a dystopia, or a post-apocalyptical event. What's worse than the visual effects is the impacts on the operations of a city, the sudden suspension of mobility, leading to an increased confinement of the population, feeling almost as if it's not the imperceivable dust or sand circulating the immediate atmosphere that is causing such disruption, but almost a radioactive field that forces people to withdraw. And this in turn brings about an onset of an expectation of crisis, or impending ruin. And for many people, this causes feelings of anxiety and stress. Those with respiratory problems or allergies experience great discomfort and concern, whether by the actual physical exposure to such elements or due to the psychological distress associated with the consequences of such exposure. And in conclusion, you get this state of lethargy that takes over the entire city, the same way in which the sand and the dust change the skies from blue to orange. So where do these changes in Arab people's behavior or state of mind emanate from? We live in a modern world that can clearly explain to us the elemental nature of such phenomena and instruct us on how to avoid any negative experiences and repercussions. What is apparent is that what is more powerful than scientific explanations are the preconceived notions and innate sentiments Arabs have about such desert storms. Generation after another has shaped a collective memory that dates all the way back to pre-Islamic times. For Arabs during the pre-Islamic period, the storytelling linked to desert storms had a very powerful mythological tradition. One note to make clear about such storms in the Arab region is that they are not solely the result of wind and sand, and certainly not purely composed of such elements. Desert storms in certain iterations include all types of weather factors: dry heat, wind, thunder, lightning, hail, rain, and humidity. And it's this confusing state of weather that promoted a fear of the unknown, that the world was tearing itself apart and putting the Arabs in danger's way. Other troubling consequences for Arabs was the destruction of their rare and precious crops by the evil Simoom storms, where temperatures would suddenly skyrocket to over 50 degrees Celsius, thus virtually burning their produce to a crisp, thereby negatively impacting their nourishment and challenging their survivability over the hot summer periods. With the advent of Islam, the fears of desert storms took on new mental consequences, ones that reconfirmed fears of imminent doom. In the Qur'an, Surah Al-Ahqaf, meaning sand dunes, a story of the prophet Hud, who long preceded the Prophet Muhammad, was sent to the people of Ad in the Arabian Peninsula. He preached to them of humility and to prostrate to the one God. They, in turn, ignored Hud and rejected his calls for submission. Shortly thereafter, God sent upon them a desert storm so powerful that it destroyed their entire civilization. Islam, within its Qur'anic scripture, also introduced the desert storms as natural manifestations of evil creatures. The most important being of them all was Iblis, the leader of all the devils, who was created by the fire of the Simoom, the scorching hot winds of desert storms. And thus, these storms, big and small, became associated with malevolent beings of theological tradition. Demons in the midst of a burst of sandy wind became dust devils. And then, further on in folkloric tradition, the spiraling rise of silt into the atmosphere signified the dramatic arrival of a genie, a creature that was always up to no good. In the present day, perception of desert storms are not about wicked beings or an existential threat to Arab survival. Yet such events still hold an ominous feeling about them. They overwhelm the days and slow down societies to a virtual standstill, be it in Libya, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, or the Gulf states. Consequential non-weather depression looms over their large cities and smaller towns. High spirits that might be present are then overcast. Productivity is crippled, and an overwhelming sense of, let's just fast forward this day so then we can get on with our lives. Overcoming these desert storms in the past has never been an option. But today, are they still a foregone reality when we can't really do anything about them? Of course, today there are methods that allow us to better prepare for their arrival with the advanced early warning systems available. But such solutions don't really solve the problem. They assist us in managing their outcomes. One has to also recognize that with modernity, dust storms appear to have increased in volume and frequency. Overgrazing in the deserts and the destruction of local plant habitats through man's territorial expansion has seen the explosion of sand erosion around the region, thus releasing the sand and dust more easily into the atmosphere. Such a situation has been further exacerbated more noticeably with the increase of local large-scale infrastructure and construction projects. So again, what are the solutions to an ever-growing environmental problem? Well, if we simply re-stress how desert storms have increased through the removal of vegetation from the desert, then we also pinpoint the solution. The cause is obviously desertification. It's not rocket science. We need to return our deserts to their old glory, when they were lush with plant life appropriate for such hot desert climates. We don't need to import plants that will have a hard time dealing with the local conditions. Our lexicon of plantation is known and has proven itself over many millennia. Desert storms will always be a part of life in the Arab world. That's fine and even necessary, as they shape a part of the Arab identity and psyche. The Arab culture needs these various phenomena, especially environmental ones, that test their mettle, thickens their skins, and leads them to becoming one of the most resilient people throughout history. But maybe it would be great to experience them a little bit less frequently.